Chris Sale dominated the Mets to win the series last night, while Alex Anthopoulos was very emphatic that Atlanta is not selling. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Thursday, June 19th, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Ton of stuff over on the Substack. We talked about Alex Anthopoulos' comments. Premium subscribers got a transcript of his media availability with 680 The Fan in their inboxes just after lunch yesterday. We also have a newsletter from this morning about who the Braves might actively be trying to acquire. In today's show, I want to talk about how to beat Clay Holmes, right? Game 3, can you get the sweep? Strider versus Clay Holmes. I want to talk about what Chris Sale did last night and how there's still a little bit of concern about the offense. But before we do that, we've got to talk about what Alex Anthopoulos said to the media. Again, he went on 680 The Fan. This was set up very quickly. Apparently, they sent him a text on Tuesday and asked him to come on, and he said yes, he would come on Wednesday morning. And spent about 20 minutes with the guys, broke down a lot of different stuff, addressed a lot of topics. Again, talked about his thoughts on leadership in the clubhouse. He thinks it's fine. Talked about his thoughts on the job Brian Snitker has done. Talked about how the team would respond to Jurickson Profar's return and how they were treating that and their thoughts on it. A lot of good stuff in there. Again, you want to read the whole transcript, BraveToday.com, premium subscribers got that link yesterday. But I want to touch on some of the conversation he had about buying and selling at the deadline. Because Celini and Domino specifically asked about would Atlanta sell, asked about if they would sell, and specifically about Chris Sale, if Chris Sale would move. And AA was emphatic that no, the Braves were not selling. The roster as it currently is, they're not selling. And I cannot bring you audio quotes, right? That was 680 The Fan. They own the audio. I cannot bring you quotes from that, but I can I can't bring you clips, but I can read you quotes. And AA was very emphatic that they are not trading Chris Sale and they are not being sellers. So here, Domino specifically says Chris Sale could be the greatest chip in all of baseball. AA's response is no. 0. I've seen the speculation and it's completely ridiculous to me. We are not selling, especially somebody that has club control beyond the current year, will not happen. And I never make definitive statements unless I'm going to stick to them. So once you make definitive statements and then you go back on them, you're a liar and you're done. So will not happen, bold, italicize it, caps. And so much so that I'm trying to make a trade now, very hard right now, to make a trade in June just to signal to everybody that, hey, we will not sell. Now, he does mention at a different point in the interview that if things were to change and Atlanta were to be, I think he said 20 or so games back, then maybe they reassess and reevaluate that. So it's not he did give himself an out. I'm sorry, he says, I just pulled it up. He said 30 games. If we end up, like a month from now, we end up 30 games under or something crazy, there are some things I would reconsider. But Atlanta is not selling. They are not trading Chris Sale, and they are actively looking to acquire. And what I thought was really interesting was they asked about Rafi Devers. And Chris Sale said he's known for about a month that Devers was going to get moved. And he explained that's his job, right? He's supposed to know things like that. His job is to not be surprised when a deal like that is announced. So AA knew that Rafi Devers was available. He also said that it never got to the point of an offer being extended on either side. That Boston never made a specific ask of Atlanta. Atlanta never made a specific offer to Boston. They were just aware that Devers was available. And that, to his point, that's his job. He's supposed to know these things. But what I think was more interesting was Celini Domino asked about the leadership in the clubhouse. Because that's a common thread that a lot of people have pointed to and have talked about not having the leadership that you've had in past seasons, right? That you've lost Freddie Freeman. You've lost Dansby Swanson. You've lost Travis Darno. You've lost Max Fried. You've lost Ron Washington and Eric Young. Like, you've lost all of these leaders. And now that the roster's underperforming, one of the assumptions is that you're missing those leaders. And what AA talked about in this interview, and again, I thought it was really good stuff here. If you want to read it, bravestoday.com premium subscribers have a link to the entire transcript here. Is that one, if you want to build a good organization, you have to be able to withstand losing players and coaches, because that's going to happen, right? If you're a winning organization, folks are going to sign your free agents. Folks are going to poach your coaches. And even those fantastic leaders they had in 2021 weren't enough. And they knew all season it wasn't enough. He said he talked about they brought in Jock Peterson and Stephen Vogt on back-to-back days by design, and those specific individuals. He knew Jock Peterson from his time in LA, and he didn't know Stephen Vogt, but he'd heard a lot of great things from Stephen Vogt. Phenomenal clubhouse guy, funny, a joker, brought people together. And for both of them, the acquisitions were made because specifically, according to AA, we were scuffling, our clubhouse was flat. At the time, it was flat. When we acquired Jock, I told him, it's a little flat right now. I need you to be you. Bring the energy, bring what you bring. I didn't talk about his performance or any of that kind of stuff. It was, hey, what you bring to the clubhouse. And then the next day, by design, I didn't personally know Stephen Vogt, but he was at the end of his career as a backup in Arizona. I remember calling him and saying, our clubhouse is flat. And I can tell you, when we got Shane Green back early in 21, they signed Shane Green as a free agent, I think in like May, and then cut him in August, so he had an ERA of 7 or something. I was trying to spark it a little bit. He even said, man, this clubhouse is flat. We had all these great inspirational leaders that played the game right, and they couldn't do it alone. And so, like, he talked about finding the personality. And talking about this clubhouse now, he said it's not a leadership thing. Quote, I just went on this last road trip. He's talking about Milwaukee. We all saw the pictures circulated on Twitter of AA on a plane with headphones on. I just went on this last road trip, and that's the time when you really get a sense when things aren't going well. You start looking. Are people griping? Are they complaining? Are they pointing fingers? Whether it's here, there, wherever. There's none of that stuff going on. And this is when you normally start looking for things. We're just not playing well. Guys are absolutely frustrated. Definitely expect more of themselves. But the group has stayed together. And so AA specifically said, the team's not playing well. The leadership is there. And even when the leadership is there, like in 2021, that's not always just enough in and of itself. You sometimes need more. It's a blend of not just you need veteran leadership and setting things by example, but you need energy, you need levity, you need all of those things that can make it fun to come to work every single day. So he is actively trying to get a guy right now, actively trying to trade for somebody. I don't know who that would be. I wrote a newsletter free to everybody on bravestoday.com this morning, breaking down, trying to figure out who could be available right now that they would be going out and getting. Obviously, I didn't cover everybody. We were looking at teams who are farther back in the standings than Atlanta, which is a surprisingly small list. We didn't look at getting a guy from a mid-tier team or a contender or whatever. So go check that out. It's 1,500 words. Take you about 5 minutes to read. I think it's good stuff. The entire interview, again, 20-something minutes. A lot of good stuff. Talked about feeling okay with Snit's leadership. Just lots of different great things from AA. One of the more candid and less political GM speak interviews I think I've heard in a long time. Like, I've always, as somebody who has talked face-to-face with Alex Anthopoulos more than once. I've always thought that he was very open with the media. I know a lot of people think that he has been dishonest or has lied about things. I think the situations have changed between times he said stuff and when it's been time to put rubber to the road, like with the payroll going up thing, right? I legitimately think stuff changed behind the scenes that we don't know about. And so his original plan got scrapped. But this interview, I listened to the whole thing again so I could transcribe it and all that. This interview struck me as very open and forthcoming, right? We think we're good enough to make the postseason. I want to go grab somebody to show the clubhouse, to give them the reassurances that we think they're good enough to make the postseason. The leadership's there. They've struggled. And he specifically talks about the offense, right? Like, he specifically says that the offense has struggled and that they're not giving their relievers and their starters margin for error. Quote, the offense is something that we count on. It's been part of our identity for years, and it's something we need to get back to. So he specifically acknowledges the offense has not been good enough. But all in all, great interview from AA. I would encourage you, again, go listen to it. Again, premium subscribers can read the entire transcript and listen to the audio of the interview on bravestoday.com. Outside of that, I think 680 The Fan has a copy of it if you want to go listen to it. Great interview. In just a second, let's talk about the Braves' win last night over the Mets. Chris Sale was pretty dominant. Did not get the complete game. I think that's okay. We'll break it down next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. I want to talk about last night's 5-0 win in Truist Park over the Mets to officially win the series and set Atlanta up for a sweep in this one. And we'll talk about the sweep potential in the third segment. We're going to talk about how to attack Clay Holmes, what he's going to need to do, or what you're going to need to do against Clay Holmes for the offense to produce. But talking about this win, the story of this win has to be Chris Sale, right? 8 2/3 innings. He gets pulled in the ninth at 116 pitches. I think he had 102 when he went back out for the ninth. 2 outs, Brandon Nimmo checked his swing, made contact, 63.8 miles an hour off the bat to left field, and it fell between Riley and the left fielder for a single. Kind of frustrating. Had Sale gone the distance, it would have been his first complete game since 2019. So, absolutely a situation where I'm sure he wanted it. The 116 pitches was the highest pitch total for him since 2019. I am okay with them pulling Chris Sale at that point. I don't think the complete game, it would have been nice. It doesn't change anything, right? 8 2/3 or a complete game, it would have been nice to get it. Nothing fundamentally changes for Atlanta if you do it. But there is some risk involved. Again, his pitch count was already the highest he's had since 2019. 3, 4, 5 more pitches. When you get to that point in your outing, yes, he had a little bit of extra rest, but when you get to that point in your outing, to me, the risk of asking him to face yet another batter is, one, from an injury standpoint and a fatigue and all that, and two, just maybe losing the shutout is, to me, maybe not worth the ability to be like, oh, cool, complete game. You don't get extra ground in the standings for a complete game. It would have been nice. I would have loved to have seen it. Chris Sale didn't look thrilled when he came out. He also didn't argue it. He also looked to be plenty happy that they won the game when the game was over. I'm fine with them pulling Chris Sale. It's funny. He had 13 whiffs, 29% CSW in this one. And his best performing pitch was actually the fastball. It felt like New York's game plan was similar to what you saw from Philly in the 23 postseason against Spencer Strider. He's got 2 pitches. We're going to sit on the slider, and we're going to foul off the fastball. They could never really get around on the fastball. They swung 24 times at the fastball, 4 whiffs, 4 into play, 16 foul balls. He also got 12 called strikes on the fastball because They were just sitting on the slider. 9 whiffs, 9 more called strikes. They put 15 of them into play, though. Like, they were trying to not let Chris Sale beat them with the slider. They were swinging at almost every one that they saw and making contact a lot of the time. And despite that, it was really funny because you saw both Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto flinch at a front door slider that they thought was going to hit them, and it ended up in the zone for strikes. So I just thought that was hilarious, that like all the focus on the slider, and they still had some embarrassing looking at bats against the slider. And the big story of this one is that big three, right? Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso combined in this game to go 0 for 12 with 5 strikeouts. It is going to be really hard for New York to beat anybody when those 3 stars go 0 for 12 with 5 strikeouts. We've had the same conversation about Atlanta, right? About like, before Ronald came back, when Riley, Olsen, and Ozuna go 0 for whatever with a bunch of strikeouts, Atlanta's not going to win a lot of games either. And on the note of the offense, Ronald Acuna Jr. leadoff home run. I was able to find this afterwards. 36th leadoff homer of Ronald's career. 15th time it was on the very first pitch he saw. So I just thought that was a cool stat. Atlanta picks up 3 runs in the first. The second run was because Luis Torrens stops a rolling ball with his face mask. There is a specific section in the MLB rulebook, and in the Today's 3 Things game story from last night on BravesToday.com, I actually quoted the rulebook so you can see what this call was. But each runner, other than the batter, gets an inning when a fielder deliberately touches a ball with his cap, mask, or any part of his uniform detached from his proper place on his person. The ball is in play, and the award's made from the position of the runner at the time the ball was touched. So what that means, if the runner's on second, let's say he's trying to steal on a passed ball, and he's already at third base when the catcher touches the ball with his mask, it goes from the position of the runner at the time it's touched. So if he's already at third base, he gets to come home because he gets 1 base from where he already is. If he had not yet gotten to third base, he's technically considered he gets one base from where he was. The last base he was safe on was second. He would get third. In this case, you had a runner on third. And so he scored. And then Atlanta got 1 more run on a sac fly. That's the second straight game we've had a 3-run inning. The Braves added another run later. This was, I think it was the 4th inning. Ozzie Albies doubles. Michael Harris grounds out. Ozzie moves to third. And then Nick Allen walks, but Ozzie scores on a wild pitch. Luis Torrens again. Just generationally bad game for Luis Torrens. And then Ronald flies out to end the inning. So you scored 5 runs on 7 hits. Atlanta was actually 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. They left 6 on base. So 2 of your 5 runs come on an error and a pass ball. 1 more on a sac fly, and 2 of them on solo shots. Matt Olson out of the solo shot late. And I think the second inning is a microcosm of what I still worry about with this offense. Okay? Because you had an opportunity to score another run, and you couldn't get the ball out of the infield. Okay? Ozzie Albies leadoff triple. We just talked about Ozzie being bad. He has both a triple and a double in this game. Slander works. That's why we do it. Ozzie Albies on third base to start the second inning. Michael Harris pops out to third base. Nick Allen lines out to second base. They pitch around Ronald Acuna Jr., right? He sees 5 pitches. Only 1 of them is remotely near the zone enough where Ronald could foul it off. Like, they're just not giving him a pitch to hit. And then Alex Verdugo grounds out to first base. And having 3 hitters around Ronald Acuna Jr., 8, 9, and in this case, the 2-hole. Verdugo had 1 hit, came in the first inning. Just means that they don't have to pitch to Ronald. We're hoping that Jurickson Profar, when he's back in July, we're hoping that he's enough of a threat at the plate where they have to pitch to Ronald. But we don't know if that's going to be the case. We don't know what to expect from Jurickson Profar. We just don't know what he's going to do on a game-to-game basis because we don't know how much of his improvement was due to performance-enhancing drugs, how much of that was the mechanical changes that AA talked about when he explains why they signed Jurickson Profar. And so, yes, you scored 5 runs, but go back and think about the way that you did this. If we get 2 run scoring errors from the opposing catcher and our starter goes 8 2/3 scoreless, we can easily win the game. Like, that worked yesterday. That's not a sustainable plan going forward. And so, yes, you've won the series. The offense still needs to be better. The offense still has not shown that it's good enough to consistently and reliably compete with the best teams in baseball. And again, yes, you act like you won the game. This feels like it's nitpicking. But in the series so far, Atlanta has 19 at-bats with runners in scoring position, and they have 3 hits, and all of them came in game 1. All I'm saying is you've got to be better in that situation. The offense has to be better in that situation because if they're not, it's going to be hard to replicate this every day. Again, it worked in this one. You got 7 innings from Schwellenbach on game 1. You got 8 2/3 from Sale. Sale just completely shut the door on New York. They couldn't do anything against him, and that's why you won. The 2 solo shots would have been enough. But normally, 2 runs is not going to be enough to win you a game. So they got to be better. In just a second, let's talk about how to be better against Clay Holmes tonight. What does he do? How can you attack him? We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. Hoping for a sweep tonight, right? I'm going to have a solo postcast after the game, breaking down what happened. So again, hopefully Atlanta can win this one. But let's talk about Clay Holmes. Being completely honest, I wanted Atlanta to sign Clay Holmes this offseason. A lot of people don't like these. I am a fan of the reliever to starter conversions. Simply because, one, if it doesn't work out, you still have a reliever. Like, the risk is lower because you still have a pretty decent reliever. And 2, if it does work out, which outside of the injuries, Reynaldo Lopez has worked out, you typically get good value on the contracts. They're not making typical starter money. They're making less money, and they're typically not signing for as many years, which means you don't have the long-term injury risk that you would have if you sign somebody to a 7-year deal and they blow their elbow out in year 2 or something. I'm a fan of reliever to starter conversions. Plus, I'm a pitching nerd, and typically that kind of conversion involves a lot of work on workloads. It involves adding pitches and all that kind of stuff, and I just like those things. So that's why I'm a fan of that. And I wanted Atlanta to sign Clay Holmes. We don't know how close they came. They were supposedly in on Jeff Hoffman, and they would have done that for Hoffman were it not for the physicals showing the shoulder issues and them having to change course and change the offer and him ultimately not taking it. Baltimore was in that same boat, by the way. And so let's look at what Clay Holmes does. As a closer, Clay Holmes was a really weird profile for a closer. Sinker, slider, sweeper, which is not really something that you see a ton. Okay? So the slider had more drop than a conventional slider. So does the sweeper. The sweeper has significantly more drop than a conventional sweeper. But the slider functions as a cutter-like bridge pitch, okay? Rather than having a ton of induced vertical break on a four-seam fastball and then some induced vertical break on a cutter, and then having a slider or a sweeper that's like neutral on drop, but it's all horizontal movement. Instead, Holmes has a sinker with a little bit of IVB, right? And then he has a slider that drops some and a sweeper that drops more. So it's still a bridge pitch in the middle from a lateral movement perspective and a vertical movement perspective. But when he decided to be a starter, he said that's not enough. And I don't know how much of that was the Mets pushing that, how much of that was him, but he added 3 more pitches. Okay? Clay Holmes added a changeup, a four-seamer, and a cutter. And it looks to me like he added those pitches to help him against lefties. Last year, lefties hit 258 against him, and his strikeout rate was like half of what it was against righties. So righties will still see the old Clay Holmes for the most part. Sinker, sweeper, slider is the majority of what he does against righties. Now, he will throw in some of those new pitches, right? He'll occasionally flip over a changeup or a four-seamer or a cutter to a righty. But for the most part, righties are still seeing the old Clay Holmes, okay? He's going to let you put some balls in play. Anytime your primary fastball is a sinker, you are okay with getting balls in play. And credit where it's due, in this series, Pete Alonso's been pretty good at first base. Like, defensively, he's not bad at first base this series. And so it's worked out so far for Clay Holmes. He has a 2.87 ERA in 14 games. Now, lefties, this is where it's going to be different, okay? Because you're going to get sinker changeup as the primary two-pitch combination. After that, it's even between cutters and sweepers and sliders, and then he caps that off with some four-seam fastballs. Like, lefties are going to see all six pitches. You may not see all six pitches in your one at-bat, but if you have 3 at-bats against him, you will see all 6 pitches. A righty may see 4 of the 6. And it's predominantly going to be just those 3 of the sinker, sweeper, slider. But again, for lefties, sinker, changeup is the main thing he's doing. And then cutter, sweeper, slider all get mixed in kind of equal amounts with some four-seamers. So it's a much harder at-bat for lefties. But at the same time, lefties are batting 225 off of Clay Holmes. Lefties are actually batting less, like they're doing worse against him than righties are. Righties are hitting 238 off of Clay Holmes. Lefties are hitting 225. Now, it's almost equal on plate appearances. Like there's 8 more plate appearances or 6 more to righties than the lefties. Lefties are walking significantly more. The strikeout rates are close, but lefties are walking significantly more. So you got that going for you. But it's a tougher at-bat for a lefty, but there's a better chance you're going to walk. He can't control all of these new pitches as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. I do think that this is a matchup where Atlanta's lefties can do some work off of Clay Holmes. I do think that this is a winnable matchup. Part of me, I'm really curious to see what Spencer Strider looks like. Because again, the last time out, he looked significantly better and a lot closer to the old Spencer Strider than what we saw in the first 2 games, or the first couple starts. But it was also against Colorado, right? He had double-digit strikeouts, but it was against Colorado. Grant Holmes had even more strikeouts the next game. So does all of that, does that extra velocity, the extra whiffs on the slider, the strikeouts, does that all carry over to a much better lineup in New York? I don't think it's going to be as good, but I do think it will be better than his earlier starts. Like, I do think there is some expectation of improvement over his earlier starts. I don't think he'll have as many strikeouts as he did against the Rockies, but I do think he'll be better. And Atlanta winning this series would go a long way, 1, towards us having a really fun live show on Friday, but 2, go a really long way towards showing this team, to Alex Anthopoulos' point, that they have the talent to make the postseason. I know a lot of us don't think it's going to happen. I'd like to think pretty clear at this point that I expect us to know by the end of this month what's going to happen. And I have to be honest, sweeping the Mets would go a long way towards me thinking, yeah, they're probably going to at least be contending for the postseason. Because again, they're 33-39 right now. They are 3rd place in the East. Going off of their runs scored versus runs allowed, they should be 38-34, which would 5 games improvement would put them right in the mix in the wildcard race. So we'll see what Atlanta does. Again, it really feels like this game While you normally would say, oh yeah, you've already won the series, this game isn't as important, it feels like this one is. And hopefully Atlanta comes out on top. I'll have today's 3 things on BravesToday.com after the game. We'll do a postcast, Locked On Sports Atlanta and Locked On Braves, and then we will be back on this show tomorrow for our noon live show. Be prepared. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the notification bell, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you know when we go live tomorrow. We do a lot of mailbags in there. It's typically about 45 minutes or so. So stay ready for that. If you're listening on audio, do me a favor. Leave a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music. I think Apple lets you leave like words of affirmation, a written review. So feel free to do that as well. Usually whenever I find one of those, it's pretty funny. I try to find a way to read it on the show. So we might do that tomorrow, actually. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.